Hey everyone, this is RoboJack. This is part 4 of a series of out-of-bounds tutorial videos for Metroid Prime 2. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to get back inbounds after you've been out of bounds and you want to go back inside of a room. I'll talk about that in this video. So the easiest way, or usually the easiest way of getting inbounds in a room is to go to a room that has an open ceiling like this, where you can just like see straight down into the room, and all you do is just go in Morph Ball and you will fall back in the room. And now I'm back in bounds. Now some rooms have open ceilings like this, but they're not actually, you can't actually fall through them. So for example, the other part of this room over here, it looks like it has an open ceiling. Like you can shoot through it and it looks like it's open up. It looks like it's open. But if you morph and fall, there's something that you hit. There's collision in the way. So it looks like it's open, but there's actually stuff in the way. Some rooms have ceilings like this. You kind of just have to figure that out on a room by room basis. But the only way to find out is just by falling and seeing if you fall through the ceiling, basically. But it depends on which room you're talking about, whether or not it has an open ceiling versus a closed, or a ceiling with collision like this. So the next way of getting inbounds is something called ceiling warping. It's usually the most common way of getting inbounds. So in order to do that, what you have to do is first get to a door. So I'm going to fall into this door right here. Alright, so I'm just going to fall in the door, and I'll load the next room. Alright, so in order to ceiling warp, the first thing you have to do is, or first thing you have to remember is that you cannot ceiling warp into a room that you are transitioned to. So I'm transitioned to bioenergy production right now, and in order to ceiling warp, I could not do it in that room. So let's say if I wanted to go inbounds in the other room, I would stay transitioned to bioenergy production and then jump forward onto this collision and then just go in Morph Ball. And there are two ways to get back inbounds using this method. The first one is just by bombing and moving a little bit and then unmorphing. Sometimes it doesn't work. You might have to do it a couple times. Depends on the collision. There we go. So just like that, you just bomb, move a little bit, and then unmorph, and that usually drops you in. The other method you can do is, rather than bombing, you can actually boost. So if I boost forward and then unmorph, I get dropped in bounds just like that. Now, in either case, what you have to make sure you do before you continue going through the game, after ceiling warping like that, is you have to, because the game still thinks you're in bioenergy production, you have to go over and touch the door. So just walk towards it and then walk away, and now it thinks I'm in save station A. You can also shoot the door and open it and walk through. That works too, but usually just touching it is enough. But you have to make sure you do that, because if you don't transition back to the room that you're physically in, then you won't be able to load more rooms. You won't be able to continue going. Now, as I said earlier, you cannot ceiling warp into the room that you are transitioned to. So if I had transitioned to save station A, and then I tried to do a ceiling warp by just doing the same process, move a little bit, unmorph, I can't fall in bounds. See, it still keeps me on top of the collision. It's because, like I said, you cannot ceiling warp into a room that you transition to. You have to transition to a different room and then ceiling warp into that room, basically, the first room. So another thing you have to keep in mind when you're trying to ceiling warp is the fact that you cannot ceiling warp into another room if you're within the room box of the room that you're transitioned to. So for example, if I transition myself to bioenergy production, the game thinks I'm there, I would not be able to ceiling warp into the part of Plaza Access that touches, or is basically, it's the part that's right on top of bioenergy production. because the box of bioenergy production, the three-dimensional box that encloses that room, is actually, it actually encloses part of Plaza Access. The little part that of Plaza Access that's above bioenergy production, that's inside of bioenergy production's box. So I would not be able to ceiling warp into that spot. So like, I'll show you that right here. So if I transition to bioenergy production as I demonstrated earlier with ceiling warping, and then I jump forward to this collision and go morph ball and try and do the same process. If I unmorph, it doesn't drop me in because I'm still in the box of bioenergy production or bioenergy production. So what I would have to do would be to jump farther than the box, get outside of bioenergy production's box, and try and go inbounds in another part of this room. So for example, I'll try it over here. Right here, if I go in morph ball and bomb and unmorph, it should drop me in. It might take a couple tries as last time. There we go. So now I'm back in bounds. And I can continue going as long as I remember to transition the door again by touching it. And yeah, now I'm back. Now I'm transitioned to Plaza Access. So another way of getting inbounds is by touching a trigger that teleports you inbounds, basically. There are multiple types of those triggers. One of them is a terminal fall trigger. A terminal fall trigger is in a room like this where it's got a giant like open area that if you fall down, you get transported up. So like this, if you fall off, it transports you back up. You can actually use that to your advantage if you're out of bounds. If you touch that trigger that transports you while you're out of bounds, you'll get teleported inbounds. So you can use that. So here, now that I'm out of bounds, if I jump forward and basically just jump off the edge, I'll hit that trigger and it'll teleport me back inbounds. So that's one type of trigger. Another type of trigger that can teleport you back inbounds is like a boss or fight trigger of some kind. So for example, the quadraxis fight trigger, normally, you just jump down into the room and starts the cutscene, and then it starts the boss fight. So you can actually use that while out of bounds. So I'm now out of bounds, and if I walk forward towards that trigger, I should hit it. It'll start the cutscene, and I'm now in bounds. So another type of trigger you can use to get in bounds is a scanning trigger. So like if you scan something and it activates some kind of cutscene, oftentimes it'll transport you in bounds. So this scan portal in Portal Terminal, if you scan that while you're out of bounds, it'll activate this cutscene, and then it'll activate the portal cutscene. Now this only works in the first time you activate the portal, but it's one way of getting in bounds, and there are other types of things you can scan throughout the game that can teleport you in bounds. So now I'm in bounds and I'm in the dark world, so that's another way, another type of trigger you can use. The last type of trigger you can use to get in bounds is a portal, a normal portal, not a scan portal. So if I just jump towards this scan portal, normal portal, and then I shoot it, if I just touch it from out of bounds, I'll get teleported, or I'll be able to use the portal and it'll teleport me inbounds and to the dark world at the same time. To the light world at the same time. There we go. So the last way of getting inbounds is by basically having a room load around you. So in order to do that, you have to you need to go to a door to a room that isn't loaded yet, and you basically want to fall down, like use morph ball to fall down right in front of the door before the room loads, such that when the room does load, you're inside of the room and it'll load around you basically. So I'm going to test that here. Basically, I'm going to walk over to this door. Now because this is a proximity load, this room's going to load basically immediately, so it's loaded right now, as you can see. I jump to the right, it's loaded. I can jump back to the left. Alright, So I'm going to try and get over to the other room over there, the other door over there, before it loads. I'm going to have it load around me. So if I quickly jump to the right, walk through the ether over here, and now I should be in bounds. If I just walk forward, touch the door, I'm now in bounds. All I had to do is touch the door to actually load the visuals, but the physical aspects of the room loaded around me. So that's how you load a room around you. Now sometimes that doesn't. Sometimes just walking towards the door from out of bounds won't actually load the room. You have to shoot the door to force load it. But that's another. Force loading is another way of having a room load around you. So one other thing you have to keep in mind after you've gone inbounds is there are a lot of things that are different if you haven't transitioned back to the right room. So in other words, if I ceiling warp into Grand Wind Chamber right here, let me just do it real quick. So if I ceiling warp into Grand Wind Chamber, but I forget to transition back, so the game still thinks I'm in Storage Cavern B, there will be a lot of issues that happen if you don't transition back, basically. Like, first of all, you can't scan anything. Things are not scannable. You can't use portals. You can shoot them, but when you walk through it, nothing happens. It doesn't teleport you. You can't draw in pickups like health and stuff with charge beam. They don't get attracted to your charge beam. So if there was health and I was charging, they wouldn't come towards me. And another thing is you can't open new doors to new rooms. So I can shoot this, touch the door, nothing's going to happen. Because the game still thinks I'm in Storage Cavern B, because I haven't transitioned to Grand Wind Chamber yet. So I would not be able to continue going, basically. And one other thing that doesn't affect you if you haven't transitioned to the room that you're physically in, rooms that have terminal falls, that, if you fall off, you get transported up. If you're not transitioned to that room and you jump off, the terminal fall won't affect you. You'll just fall way down to the bottom of the room's box. That's another thing to keep in mind. So anytime you go inbounds, always remember to transition back to the room that you went inbounds in before you continue trying to do other stuff, basically. So that's pretty much it for this series on Out of Bounds in Metroid Prime 2. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section, and thanks for watching.